Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Entrepreneur Source Podcast, your career 2.0 Launchpad. On this podcast, we like to discuss the entrepreneur source and the journeys of those who have gone from maybe more of a traditional career and kind of had a career transition, and how the entrepreneur source has assisted with some of those transitions. On today's episode, I actually have two very interesting hosts here, Jason Madden and Laura Rao. Both are actually coaches currently with the Entrepreneur Source. And so we're going to have a conversation focused around the Entrepreneur Source and options for entrepreneurship and business ownership and career changes for veterans. So, how are you both doing today, Jason and Laura?
Doing great, man. Bright and early over here in Albuquerque, even earlier for Laura, I think.
Yes, it's bright and sunny in California.
Yeah, well, it is. I think I just told you I'm here in Raleigh, and it just started hailing a few minutes ago, which is bizarre. So something really interesting, I think, is that both of our coaches here today, both of you have, obviously you weren't always coaches with the Entrepreneur Source, right? You had careers and lives and everything prior to that as well. So I wanted to kind of start with some of that and kind of hear more about what led you to the Entrepreneur Source, right? What led you to this career path, and yeah, just kind of taking us through that progression. Laura, I don't know if you'd like to start us out.
Sure. I
Thank you.
was a financial person for 30 years, corporate accountant, controller, chief financial officer. I enjoyed it, but then I was looking for a change. I was concerned about my aging parents who lived in a different state than the state I was living in. And so I was looking around to see what else was out there that might offer me more flexibility. And a TES coach, an entrepreneur source coach named Paco, called me and he asked me if I wanted to be in business for myself. And I said, absolutely not. And then he asked me what I wanted to do. And I said, I wanted to help people make a positive impact in business. And I wanted to go between Washington and California. And so he suggested I do what he does. And I've been an entrepreneur source coach for over 4 years. For me, it's a perfect fit. It combines finance, contracts, and strategic planning. And I love
Fantastic.
talking to entrepreneurs. I can do it 24/7. It's very inspiring to me. It's a lot of fun to me. So I absolutely love what I do, helping people achieve their own dreams.
That's great. And we'll go more into that as well about exactly what the Entrepreneur Source does for those who be listening to this or watching this for the first time and have never come across TES before. But that's really helpful. I think, and as we get more into, I think what's really unique is that anyone who is doing coaching for the Entrepreneur Source, almost everyone I've met has gone through that journey themselves first, right? They
Mhm.
have, they know firsthand, including you, Laura, just like you shared, like what it's like to be in a career that maybe you're not fully fulfilled in, and kind of what it takes to make that change. So it's not someone just a staffing agency trying to land you a job, or someone trying to give you advice that they've never lived themselves. And I think that's what's really special. Going off of that, Jason, I don't know if you want to kind of share a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I was career military. I joined the Marines right out of high school. I was actually on contract with the Coast Guard, but the events of 9/11 happened, and immediately I joined the Marine Corps Infantry and went to boot camp in San Diego at MCRD, in October of that year, like right after 9/11. I was in the Marine Corps as an infantryman for about 4 years, took a quick break, did some soul searching, and joined the Army as an officer. Did several years in the Army. I got out actually about 5 years ago. So my roles in the Army were mostly on the military intelligence side. So I was doing a lot of really interesting things in countries like Iraq and Africa, all over Africa, I should say, continent, right? And it as my career was kind of winding down, I was having some medical issues and things like that were kind of preventing me from serving at the capacity that I wanted to. And the Army actually offered me to do a medical discharge, and I think it really made sense for me at that time because my wife is active duty with the Air Force. So I started looking at alternative career paths. I had the opportunity to continue to be an intelligence officer, and maybe do contracting or work with an agency or something like that. But I've been doing that kind of stuff since I was 17 years old. So I thought it was a good time to start reinventing myself. So I started really pursuing entrepreneurship and seeing what that would look like for me. And I'm kind of a meathead, so I really like going to the gym and stuff like that. So I figured, hey, maybe I should own a gym. Maybe I should go research this other gym franchise and see what happens. And I was also on some veteran mentor networks, and I found somebody that was in franchising on this veteran mentor network. I'm going to drop her name. It's Susan Scott's. She had so many hours under her belt as a mentor on that platform that I had to reach out to her. And she kind of, put me through the reps of what we do with the Entrepreneur Source. And we started exploring some options together. And I just told her to stop. Like, hey, can I do what you're doing? Because I feel like there's like a disparity in education and knowledge on the military side on this particular form of entrepreneurship. Because like in my transition assistance program, they were talking a lot about starting a business from scratch and everything like that, but I never heard franchising mentioned once. And like that's some valuable stuff that we're not getting in this military program that I think I can help bridge the gap on. Can I be part of the Entrepreneur Source? I want that to be my
Yeah.
first franchise, and it took me like 2 months of investigation, but I was in there pretty quick.
Well, that's awesome. Wow. So yeah, I mean, obviously the firsthand military experience, which I had no guess looking at you that you ever work out. So that is news to me. But no, it sounds like that's quite the journey, and you were able to land on somewhat of an unexpected path would be my guess, right? You were looking for maybe opening a gym or doing one of these other avenues, and you ended up instead being able to help others do, kind of do the same thing. So you already kind of touched on some of that, but if for those who don't really understand, okay, they keep talking about the entrepreneur source, these journeys, coaching, kind of break it down for us. Either of you can jump in on this, but what is the entrepreneur source, right? This is your first contact with somebody. Um, how do they help someone transition? Like how does it all work?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So this is my perspective, and this is how I conduct my coaching, and how I kind of introduce myself to new clients. But what we do is we provide that no cost education, awareness, and discovery service to people who are in a career transition who might have that additional interest in exploring entrepreneurship as a potential career path, and also gives our clients the opportunity to explore different possibilities, even though they might still be looking at a job. So that way they can have an opportunity to make a really clear and educated choice on their future.
That's awesome. So it's for really anybody, right? So when people reach out to you, do they need to be in a certain life situation? Do they need to have former business ownership experience? What does that look like?
I say no because I had zero entrepreneurial experience, and I'll let Laura talk here in a minute. I had zero entrepreneurial experience coming into this, aside from maybe some education at the academic level, which doesn't mean a whole lot, right? But it could be anybody. It could be anybody as long as they have that entrepreneurial curiosity and are willing to make the moves to make that happen. Sorry, Laura, go ahead.
No, I agree with you completely. I think it's a good educational journey for anybody who has ever considered having their own business or just curious about it. Our educational journey is good for everyone, and I think everyone should go through it because it does open a lot of doors that most people aren't aware of, including me. I wasn't aware of it before I became familiar with it. So I think it's a great educational journey. It's a safe zone to explore what's out there. And the vast majority, if not all of our clients, are usually surprised at how many options are available to them and the sort of resources that are there to help them have clarity about their choices. And I'm going to speak for Jason here. We don't care if they want to go into business or not, but we do want them to have an understanding of what's available to them and to have clarity about which path is best for them.
To that point, I've had several clients that did not choose entrepreneurship as the path because maybe they weren't, maybe the timing was not correct for them, or maybe or maybe there's some type of personal thing happening in their life that was kind of preventing them from moving forward. But, you know, a lot of times I see those folks a year or 2 years down the road, and we are in the right timeline and we are in the right time frame. So even if you're not in the right perfect situation to do it, because I don't think that situation actually exists, that perfect situation, even if you're not there, I think you owe it to yourself to kind of get out there and explore and look what's available.
Yeah, and I really think that's what really sets the entrepreneur, TES apart, is that it is an exploratory process, right? It's not somebody down your throat saying take this job, take this interview, or whatever, right? It's really figuring out what your goals and your kind of what your lifestyle goals are, and your income goals, and building a plan around all of that. It starts with you as an individual, which I think is a very unique process that really no one else out there is offering.
Mhm.
Yeah, and if you look at where we're at today, they call it the Great Resignation, or I like to call it the Great Reconsideration too,
Right.
because everybody's kind of taking a closer look at their career, especially post pandemic. What's going on with Ukraine and things like that. I think life's too short to not be happy with your career, and if you have some type of tool to take control of it, I think it's a lot more attractive to people these days, especially folks in my generation. I consider myself kind of an elder millennial, right? But you see a lot of the millennial generation is moving towards entrepreneurship, or at least doing something on the side so that they can pad their career and have something to fall on as they get older.
We are also, I think both Jason and I are also clients and coaches. I think each of us, I think he owns two franchises at least, and I own two franchises. So we really practice what we preach.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And so you both have mentioned franchising. So ultimately everyone who goes through the process, who chooses to kind of business ownership as as their path, usually end up in a franchise ownership situation, right? That's kind of what it's centered around.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason we do that, because it really, not everybody I work with actually goes into franchisings. There are some that want they have that unique thing that they want to create, and that's
Hmm.
okay, because they can actually, kind of balance that against doing something that's a little bit more turnkey. And the reason I enjoy using franchising as part of our education process is because when you're working with somebody that's been in a professional career for some amount of time, they want to reduce their risk. And it makes a lot of sense to fall in on a proven system and to fall in on something that helps you start your business on third base rather than on the bench.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think, and this was touched on in some past conversations I've had with other coaches on this show before, which is many people, right, think there's really only there's two options, right? You work a corporate job forever, or you have like the next, I don't know, the next Steve Jobs type of moment, and you create this mega business, and you're this huge entrepreneur that has this new idea you're bringing to the market. But I think where this bridges the gap, and where franchising in general, kind of seems to bridge that gap, is there is an in between, right? There are proven business models that you can plug into where, as they say, right, you work for yourself, but not by yourself, right? Where you're able to have something that you can plug into an established brand, oftentimes that have a national presence, but you are the owner of your own destiny and your own market and your own you really get to influence the brand on your own level, as an owner. So
Well, absolutely, and kind of steering the conversation back towards veterans and entrepreneurship. That's why I think veterans make such great franchisees, because we're talking about processes and systems. And I can remember multiple times in my military career where I had to fall in on an SOP with maybe a little bit of training, but I had to put some critical and creative thinking towards that, and some sweat equity to that, to make that SOP even better, and make it work even greater for that organization. And veterans, that have any kind of amount of time at 4 years, whatever, in service, they've experienced that, and they're very good at doing it in the civilian world.
right, yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, you brought us right to the next point, which is what makes veteran, or not really, but specifically with veterans, what makes someone a good student or a good client, right? Like throughout this process, what are those key elements that a veteran seems to have, to have down? And you touched on some of them. And Lori, maybe you can take this one here, but kind of how does that tie into someone who has a successful journey forward?
Absolutely. I can see a lot of things. I know Jason's been in 3 branches of the military, which is very impressive. But in my military
Two.
clients, 2, okay, Coast Guard.
My wife's the third.
That's right.
I was counting Coast Guard, Marine Corps, and Army.
Oh, I didn't actually join the Coast Guard.
Okay. Thank you for still.
You've been in too many when you really can't keep count, right? So
right.
That's impressive. That's awesome.
I see some common things in my veteran clients. First of all, they're really good at teamwork, and they're good at working with diverse teams under chaotic or high stress situations. They're also mission driven. They can focus on what needs to be done. They can follow systems, and they have loads of leadership experience. I think the military is so much better than corporate America at developing leaders. They really go after it and they develop successful leaders. So, and whether it's a personal aspect of their personality or whether it's something that's trained into them through their experience, they're courageous. They don't get spooked by hitting road bumps, and every entrepreneur hits road bumps. So 1 out of
no matter what,
7 franchisees is a veteran. It's a much higher percentage than the regular civilian percentage.
Yeah, and I'll add to some of those statistics. And I think SBA just reported just this last year, 1 out of every 10 veterans is an entrepreneur. That's a lot. That's one. So the veteran population takes up about 1.5% of the nation. So 1.5% of, and that 10% of that 1.5% are all entrepreneurs. That's a pretty significant number.
That's huge.
Right there. Yeah, and they employ millions of people. About approximately 7 or 8 million people are employed by veteran-owned businesses.
Wow.
I read a statistic that veteran business owners are $41 billion in gross domestic product. That is a
41
lot
billion.
of production. Yes.
Yeah.
With a B, billion. Wow.
Billion.
Wow. That's impressive. That's impressive. So to that point, are there benefits being a veteran when it comes to the financing? Because obviously financing is a huge question for everybody, right? Like if I'm going to go open a franchise or start a business, that takes money. And how does that work?
Yeah, I'll kick that off, Laura, if you don't mind. So there's a lot of options out there, and none of them are veteran specific. So one big myth that I'd like to dispel is that the VA doesn't always offer that kind of funding for veterans to start their businesses. They actually work directly through the Small Business Administration. The SBA actually does veteran preferred lending through the SBA 7A loan, and that could be up to $150,000 or more. There's minuscule benefits as a veteran to go through there, but there's enough to be able to obtain those loans, probably a little bit easier than most people. Also, not a lot of people know this, but you can use your thrift savings plan to help finance your business. You could roll that over into a business entity called a C Corp. And that's something that could be a whole other episode to explain what that is, but just high level, right. you can use your TSP without incurring a tax penalty. So those are some of the short answer for some of those that are out there. Laura, what else do you got?
There are interesting ways to fund a business, and it's a conversation that always comes up. The positive side on that, another positive aspect of that, is that there's a VetFran program. Over 500 franchisors offer a discount to the military community. And yes. So it gives them a little bit of a lower cost on entry going into the business.
Yeah, and I've noticed through the VetFran program, they offer anywhere from 5% to 50% off a franchise fee, depending on that franchisor. So there's no set discount within the vet fran program. It's participants that will be veteran friendly, and that's why they're in there, and they offer those discounts based off of where they're at in their franchise business. And that's really great because that can really lower that cost coming in, and help you get into some of those loans like the SBA a little bit easier and facilitate you getting in there. um, yeah, and there's traditional term loans and lines of credit as well that are available, and it's just all depending on where you are personally and professionally. There's no one funding option for any one individual. There's just so many things out there, and that's where some of that coaching comes in.
Right. And I think the key takeaway is the fact that you're telling me I don't need to be sitting on $1 million in cash to become an entrepreneur or become a business owner. Right.
Mm-hmm.
There are funding options for
Well,
many of these
yeah.
opportunities, and being a veteran in some cases can give you additional benefits there as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And just a quick client story. I had a client that was working at he's a veteran. He did about 3 or 4 years and was working in a cheese factory. No kidding, a cheese factory in Wisconsin. He had suffered
Wow.
some bankruptcies in the past and things like that. We worked together previously, like 2 years ago. He had to repair his credit. For anything, you have to have at least some good credit, about 685 or 700, and he's able to repair his credit, and he came back, and now he's a successful business owner doing leather plastic restoration on his own, like a craftsman. And it's wonderful. And he
Wow.
just calls me every week, just how happy he is with his business. Sometimes we stress a little bit, but we work through some things, new business ownership stuff, but he's enjoying it. He loves it. He's out of the factory.
Fantastic. So from cheese factory to a leather craftsman.
Yeah. Yeah. Restoration work is so
That's awesome.
cool.
Fantastic. So it sounds like you've worked with a lot of veteran, clients, and kind of led those journeys. And Laura, I failed to kind of just to back up for just one moment. I know you also have some other, while you yourself weren't in the military, you are very active in the veteran community. I don't know if you want to kind of touch on a little bit of that.
Well, sure. My father was in the Air Force, and my two uncles, my favorite uncle by marriage, were in the Marine Corps. And I myself, when I was in college, I walked into the recruiting office thinking about signing up for the Army. Um, I also volunteer a lot. I came down to San Diego to be with my family, and I volunteer at the Veterans Association in North County. And I'm also a volunteer with SCORE San Diego, which is the SBA's consulting arm. And there I'm the veteran outreach contact. So we came up with a program, myself and another SCORE mentor who's recently retired from the Marines, came up with a fast track program to take what the military community learns in Boots to Business and Reboot and take it from idea to implementation. And
Wow.
so I I work with a lot of veterans in my volunteer work.
And it sounds like you both. I mean, I think the key takeaway here is you both practice what you preach, right? You both have gone through the entrepreneurial source journey yourselves. You both have experience, with Jason being a veteran, you working with a lot of veterans, and being very involved in the community. Like you both understand the veteran space, and you definitely both understand the entrepreneurship and the franchising space. I think that's what anybody would want in a coach or a guide who's going to help them make that transition, is someone who has firsthand experience in all of those things. So for people who are veterans, or maybe they're not even veterans, but they're looking for that change, what would be your advice for them if they're listening to this or watching this, or they've come across the entrepreneur source a few other times? How do they get started? Like, how do what are some key things they should focus on when they do enter this first, this coaching experience?
I'll take it. I'll take it. So when a veteran sees us, they're in a couple of places. So they're either currently working on transitioning out of the military, and that could be a year-long process in most cases, 6 months to a year-long process. So they're doing a lot of soul searching. Do I need to get a job? Should I start a business? If I'm retiring, should I just retire outright and move to the woods of Montana? There's so many different options,
Right.
right? And then on the other segment, there's those veterans that have been out for a while. They've built that professional career and they've tried that out. They've been out of the military. So I think I think there's a difference there, because when you're in that transition space, timing is everything. When you're already out and you're in that corporate space, it could still be timing, but you're a little bit more flexible to make choices for your life. Um, I'd say start and just get into this program and just kind of understand where you're at and where you want to go. Like if you were to look at your life a year from today, what needs to happen both personally and professionally for you to be satisfied with your progress. And that's a really important question to ask yourself at the very beginning of any kind of transition journey. And I think it takes a coach to kind of guide that conversation a little bit, and having an extra set of eyes to just make sure that you're dotting all your I's and crossing all your T's, and you're doing that good research and you're turning the stones.
I agree with Jason. There's a lot of resources out there to help you learn about opportunities. So if you're interested in other possibilities that's different than the traditional corporate job, please, reach out to someone like Jason or me who has a safe educational journey where you can learn and see what possibilities might meet your goals. And sometimes over our educational journey, people's goals evolve and change, and we can evolve and change with that. The feedback I most often get from my veteran clients is that our process opens their eyes and expands their horizons, and then helps them make a well educated decision. And like Jason said, I don't care if they start a business or not. I would like them to have clarity about which path is best for them.
Yeah, and I think the key. I think each of you have said it at different times is there is no obligation, right? Like kind of like you just said, and there's no cost, which sounds gimmicky when someone hears that. Like, what do you mean there's no cost? Like, I can get access to these highly qualified coaches who've been there, done that, but there's no cost to me. But there really isn't. I mean, obviously, like you two have an income structure, but it doesn't come from from the client going through coaching, correct?
Correct.
Correct. And
We get paid through the franchise community.
right. We,
Fantastic. And I think that's amazing. I mean, it's just like people who don't, who are looking for a house and don't use a real estate agent, right? It's like the structure here is that you are there to help them, and there really is zero obligation.
mhm.
It is an exploratory process, so you might go through it and decide it's not for you, or the options presented are things that, I've this was a great exploratory process, and I learned that after looking at these other things, I really am happy where I am. Like I'm okay staying here. Or you might go through it and your life could change, for the better, right? And you could end up in a business ownership opportunity that you never ever foresaw yourself being in.
Many outcomes, yeah, and some of the things I coach my clients on too is that if you're in a current role and you're exploring entrepreneurship, there's all these different ways you could explore entrepreneurship: startup, franchise, buy an existing business. But one that not a lot of people really think about too. So although entrepreneurship is not for everybody, but intrapreneurship can be. So if you're in an organization, you can get yourself to the point where you can have a little bit more autonomy and flexibility within your organization. And sometimes that's better for people. Entrepreneurship is not for everybody. I absolutely say that. And sometimes I will ask my clients to kind of ponder that if it really is for them when they get to a certain point. Perhaps we should look at different form of entrepreneurship or intrapreneurship so that you can kind of get that income, lifestyle, wealth, and equity within your own organization.
When we use the term franchising, the franchise industry, that's an umbrella term. It does include things like Jason mentioned, like resale businesses, franchises, distributorships, dealerships, licenses, and other sort of business format programs. It's an umbrella term that could mean more than just your typical franchises. And we're familiar with more than 80 industries, so there's a lot of diversity. People associate franchising with restaurants, but that's just one industry. And there's a lot of really interesting possibilities and maybe 30 different criteria: home based, virtual, um, no employees, small team, large team, scalability. So we can explore and discuss all of that.
Yeah, it's just all how it pipes into your own personal goals and your own personal journey.
So for viewers or listeners who, whether they're chomping at the bit right now to get on the phone with you and change careers because they're miserable where they are, or they're just curious, right? Maybe they're comfortable but bored, or just want to explore what, kind of what's out there. How do they go about getting started? Where, what's the best way to reach out to, each of you or to the Entrepreneur Source?
Probably the best way to reach out to me is to connect with me on LinkedIn, Laura Rao, or through our website, lrao.esourcecoach.com, or by email, lrao@esourcecoach.com. Is that how you like to be contacted, Jason?
Yeah, similarly, I love communicating over LinkedIn Messenger on there. So you can find me Jason Madden on LinkedIn. I'm probably the only Jason Madden with a bunch of tattoos. You can also find
Who
me
doesn't
at
work out, by the way. He does not
I
work
don't
out.
work out. You can also find me on my website, and you can find all of my content and all my podcasts and things like that at jmadden.esourcecoach.com. And my email kind of reflects that to jmadden@esourcecoach.com.
Well, there you go. Well, you guys heard it here. I mean, really, so whether you're a veteran, by the way, this is not limited to veterans, of course, right? So whether you're a veteran or you're not a veteran, you're watching, listening to this, and you've been curious, maybe you've heard some of our past episodes as well. There's no reason not to act on any of that curiosity, right? There really is. You only have things to gain, whether that's an entirely new career path or it's just better insight into your current career. Um, uh, the Entrepreneur Source can help you out. So definitely reach out. And definitely continue to join us on these episodes every month. We'll continue to stress new stories and other ways that you can get involved with coaches and other success stories. So thank you for listening today, and we'll see you next time.